Hello everyone, welcome back to Triple Play Analytics. Sorry for the delay to get this episode up. I just had a right shoulder injury and surgery, so I've been rehabbing and kind of resting and haven't been able to do much analysis and work. But now that I've gotten a bit better, I've gone back to a normal routine. So videos and analyses should be going up more frequently and more often. So, before we get into the depth and analysis, I'd like to give a few shout outs over the past 2-ish weeks. First, Derek Brassard. He was traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins for a first round pick, Ian Cole, who was later traded, and Gustafsson at goalie. So, welcome Derek Brassard. He scored his first goal as a Penguin, I believe against the New York Islanders. He scored, in the crease, which is where the Penguins need to increase their scoring. Secondly, I'd like to give a shout out to Anthony Davis, who's been carrying the Pelicans through a very tough schedule and helping them win without Boogie Cousins. And that's just pretty crazy. New Orleans wants to keep Davis. They don't want to trade him away. They don't want to lose him to free agency. So he's playing like that, and he's just been carrying this team, and he's having them fight for that final playoff spot. And he's making a push for it, and it looks like they just might win that spot. Next, Taylor Hall with his point streak. Now, if you're personally speaking, I think Taylor Hall is slightly just a bit overrated in his point streak because maybe, over the past 26 games, yes, he's put up a point per game, but he scored only 30 points. That's the same amount of time. There are a few players that have put up in the 40s plus points that don't get the recognition, but still. Scoring in 26 games straight is phenomenal. The person, there's only one person who scored 40 or more games straight, and that's Mario Lemieux. No one's gonna break that. So the fact that Taylor Hall is currently at 26 is pretty crazy. So shout outs to him. His play has really pushed the New Jersey Devils into a playoff spot, and they're almost really in a good spot to where they can, their rebuilding is almost done. Let's just put it that way. They found their goaltending, they found their defense, they found their offense. They are now a force to be reckoned with, and Taylor Hall is leading the way, but he needs some help from the younger guys, and some of the veterans need to step forward and also increase on point production. But Taylor Hall has been putting numbers up, and he's been consistently contributing to the winning effort there in New Jersey, so shout out to him. And finally, Patrick Laine of the Winnipeg Jets. He's a goal-scoring phenom. With one more goal, he passes Sidney Crosby in the list of goal scoring by a teenager, and he's something else. Now, yes, I think he's eclipsed 30 goals already. He's got 17 left, so I think he's trying to get to Ovechkin's marker and get to that 40. It's going to be kind of hard with the amount of games left in the season, but still, for a 19-year-old to come in and just tear up the league, and he's helping lead Winnipeg. He's helping points on the board to help them get into the playoffs and really make that deep playoff run. So shout out to him. He's really been a force to be reckoned with on the Winnipeg Jets. So shout out to him. All right, that concludes the shout outs today. But now let's head into the analysis. And today we're going to be looking at a good guy. He likes playing hockey, likes playing hard, likes scoring. He just, he has fun a lot. Yep, we're talking about Phil Kessel. So, who is Phil Kessel? Well, let me give you a bit of a rundown on Amanda Kessel's brother. So, he's a forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins as shown, but originally he was drafted in 2006 by the Boston Bruins as a fifth overall pick. He was then traded to Toronto, and he signed an 8-year deal there. And then 2 seasons ago, he was traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins as in Toronto, he was seen as a locker room plague. He was just, a lot of his teammates couldn't play with him. He couldn't play with his teammates. He was deemed uncoachable. Well, the uncoachable Phil Kessel then went to go on and win back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, and is now seen as one of the prominent elite scorers and elite passers in the league. Last season, in 82 games, he scored 23 goals and had 47 assists. Well, this season, in 67 games, he has scored 27 goals and has got 49 assists. He's scoring at an unreal rate for him. The higher, he hasn't been a point a game player since the 2012-2013 season when Toronto made it to the quarterfinals, and that season, was the season cut short. He scored 20 goals and 32 points in 48 games, and 32 assists. Excuse me. So he had 52 points in 48 games. That's pretty crazy. The next season after that, Toronto was 6th in the division. He had 37 goals, 43 assists, and 80 total points. Well, this season, I'm projecting him to get above 90 points. I'm thinking he's going to score 34 goals, 58 assists, and that's 92 total points. I kind of have a little weighted average linear model that takes into some account the opponents he's playing and the defenses and the goalies he's going up against, who I think will be starting, some of the games. But that being said, Phil Kessel is going to be a point-a-game player. He is 6 points away from having 82 points in under 82 games. That is just crazy for him. That is crazy for any player in the National Hockey League, just because in the league currently it is extremely, extremely hard to put up points like that. And he's just finding a way to do it with the Penguins. So he's an stylish scoring winger, and he has a lethal wrist shot. However, something a lot of people kind of gloss over is his passing ability and his vision, and his ability to get the puck to playmakers like Evgeny Malkin, like Sidney Crosby. He gets the puck to these guys when he knows he doesn't have anything. And when he knows he has a shot or a play that he can make, he will take it. But if he knows it's not a 100% move, he's going to move the puck to someone who has a higher chance of scoring and putting the puck behind a goalie. But why is he important to look at? We already know all this stuff. He's shown statistically and his play-wise, he's a great player. We've shown that he's, a phenomenal player. But he's doing it at an exorbitant rate that hasn't been seen by him. Let's just look at, his point scoring, for example. Right here, this graph shows Phil Kessel scoring the cumulative goals, cumulative assists, and cumulative points over the 67 games. And you can see the linear regression I've created for all three of those. So Phil Kessel is scoring points at over a point a game pace right now. And he's just, the growth is insane. But what's more insane, I think, is the goals keep coming. He hasn't really had a drought where he hasn't scored a goal in a while. I think maybe there was a 4, 5, 6 game stand where he didn't score any goals. But then if you look between, let's say, the 47 and 53 game mark, he didn't score many goals there. I don't think he scored a goal there. But now look at the assists. The assists were still coming. He was still getting points. He was still helping the team out and helping them win games. And helping them be competitive and try to win games. Because the Penguins had downtimes this season. There are games this season where they just looked like they were a bottom 10 team. But then there are games where he helped them look like they were a Stanley Cup contender and championship team. He's been doing that. And, as we move on, let's look at the points against teams he plays. There's only 3 teams that he hasn't been able to put a point up against. 3 teams. Dallas, Los Angeles, and St. Louis Blues. Every other team in the league he's put up points against. Against, the New York Rangers, he's put up 6 points against. Against the Tampa Bay Lightning, he's put up 5 points. Against Boston, he's put up 5 points. He's putting up points against absolutely great teams. Maybe the Rangers aren't that good of a team, but look at the number one team in the league right now, the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's put up 5 points against them. Against Boston, one of the best teams in the league, and one of the best teams in the East behind Tampa Bay. He's put up 5 points. Against the Detroit Red Wings, 4. Against Minnesota, 4. Against the Islanders, 4. Against Washington, he's put up 4 this season. Against Carolina, another playoff team, 4. Against Arizona, a rebuilding team that has tons of talent and really good goaltending with Antti Ranta. He still put up 4 points. But then there are teams where he hasn't really put up points against. The New Jersey Devils, he's put up a point against. The Ottawa Senators, he's only put up a point against a team that is clearly in a rebuilding phase. They're clearly sellers. Against Toronto, a team where he should be putting up points against because he should know how to play against a team like Toronto. However, he hasn't. So Phil Kessel has had his ups and downs this season, but yet he will still find a way to score points. And let's look, that's just total points. Let's look at just goals now. In red you see all the assists he gets. In green you see blue you see all the goals he gets. A lot of these teams, he's definitely had assists. Every team he's played against, except for Chicago and Colorado, he's had an assist against them. He's assisted on a goal against them. Chicago and Colorado are the only teams he's played where he hasn't put up an assist. He's put up goals that game. Now there are a few teams where he hasn't even put a goal in. Calgary, he hasn't put a goal in. New York, the New Jersey Devils, he hasn't potted a goal in. The Ottawa Senators, he hasn't potted a goal in. The San Jose Sharks hasn't put a goal in. Toronto, he hasn't scored against. Vancouver, he hasn't scored against, but he still put up 3 assists against them. He's finding a way to get the job done, and that is a sign that he is an effective player. He is effective in what he does. He's effective in either moving the puck or scoring. And this brings us to a statistic I created called player effectiveness. So player effectiveness, let me throw up a graph for you to describe, to just look at what, actually first, this is against divisions he plays against. This is a little pie chart showing points per division. As you can see, he scores actually primarily against the Metro because he's in the Metro, but then the Atlantic next. He scores a lot against the Eastern Conference teams, but then the Pacific Division is also seeming to be victim to Phil Kessel. But now let's go to a plus-minus value. There, some teams he's been out on the ice for very, very poor times. He wasn't very effective against them, like Anaheim. But then the Rangers, he's extremely effective. He's a +5 against the New York Rangers. Against Vancouver, he's a -4, but Vancouver's clearly a bottom 10 team. They've just found advantages when he's on the ice. They realize he is a defensive liability. But now let's get to player effectiveness. So this graph here might be very, very confusing. As you see, there's a lot of stuff in it. So let me break down player effectiveness for you while you look at this graph. Player effectiveness is a stat I created where it weighs a player's offensive, defensive, general on ice, and penalty effectiveness. And it kind of accumulates that to decide how effective is a player. So on average, the average NHL effectiveness is, the average NHL player is about, has an effectiveness rating of 2.178. Phil Kessel, on average, has a player effective rating of 3.107. So he's balling out this in his effectiveness. He's 142%, 143% above average. But let me explain to you actually the calculation for player effectiveness. So first, offensive effectiveness is a summation of 3 effectivenesses: of shot effectiveness, goal effectiveness, and assist effectiveness. So shot effectiveness is his Corsi 4 times the shots he's taking plus the ratio of shots he takes over the team's shots totals. Goal effectiveness is goals plus shots he takes times Corsi 4 times his shifts per 60. And then his assist effectiveness is mirroring the goal effectiveness, but instead of adding goals to shots, you add assists to shots. So you sum the shot effectiveness with his goal per point ratio times goal effectiveness, and add that to assists per point times assist effectiveness, and you get his offensive effectiveness. So let me show you kind of a cleaned up version of this graph of the four major ones: player, offensive, defensive, and the NHL average. So defensive effectiveness, as you can see, is Phil Kessel's liability. Some games he's defensively very good. Other games he's defensively terrible. Like if we look at Game 47, Game 47 was against Anaheim, and Phil Kessel was not very good that game. Phil Kessel scored a goal and had an assist. Offensively, he was very good, but he was a -4 in total. And he took a penalty. His shooting percentage was 25%. He had 4 shots. That means he had 23 shifts, and he was on the ice for 19 minutes and 20 seconds. He had a hit, and his Corsi was 58%. But you see, his player effectiveness percentage was negative 13.71%. His defensive effectiveness was terrible, and his offensive effectiveness was kind of weighed down because he couldn't help his team. Effectively, when he was on the ice, he didn't help his team win. Even though, yes, he scored a goal and he assisted, that didn't really help his team that much. Because offensively, yes, he had a 3.571 offensive effectiveness. But defensively, he was a negative 3.583. That's very bad. So let me now describe to you what defensive effectiveness actually accounts for. So defensive effectiveness accounts for his hits plus his blocks times his plus minus times 1 minus his Corsi 4. So hits and blocks, in my mind, that kind of displays how often are they engaging themselves physically to either stop the puck from reaching their net or to lay the body and force the opposition to get rid of the puck quicker and therefore defensively check them, or either on a forecheck or on a back check, and try to force turnovers. And then the plus minus is I believe, a controversial part of this stat, because you might be a +5 player, but you scored no goals, had no assists, and had no shots. You were just on the ice for a goal, and you could have just stepped on the ice and you get a +1. But when I multiply that by the 1 minus Corsi 4 percentage, well, the 1 minus Corsi 4 percentage, that actually, Corsi 4 percentage tells you how often you're in the offensive zone, how often there's an event in the offensive zone and you're there. Well, 1 minus that is the opposite, how often you're in the defensive zone and an event happens there. So if his Corsi 4 is maybe a 60%, that's 40% of the time he's in the defensive zone. That's really good, because then his defensive effectiveness is going to, it's going to go a bit down. And that's that's incorrect. You want your Corsi effectiveness to kind of weigh out. You want to be near 50, because your offensive effectiveness, you want it to be high. But then you don't want to be leaving your defensive effectiveness down and, being a defensive liability and not helping out your team. That just might lead to bad things, because then you're going to be on ice for, a goal more often, and whenever you come onto the ice, there's going to be a bad matchup against most players. Now, if we go back to actually the total player effectiveness, you see there's something called PIM effectiveness, and that is his penalty minute effectiveness. So penalty minute effectiveness is, sometimes it's actually good to take a penalty, and sometimes it's really bad to take a penalty. So The way I calculate whether or not they take a good penalty or not is I take the ratio of their penalty minutes per that game, divide that by the team's total penalty minutes, multiply that by their plus minus, and multiply that by their shift per 60. So a very good example of Phil Kessel and his penalty minute effectiveness being low or not good is in the second game of the season against Chicago, where the Penguins lost 10-1, I believe. He had a minus 2.19 because I think he had a game misconduct there. He had 10 minutes and he was a minus 2. But he played only 15 minutes. So the penalty minute effectiveness, it kind of with the penalty minutes, it doesn't really hurt a player. It doesn't say, "Oh, this player is absolutely terrible," because it also weighs on the fact that how much do they actually play because of the penalties. And then finally, there's on ice effectiveness, and that is just the time on ice per the shifts they have times their Corsi for percentage. So that just really looks at each shift. How often are they in the offensive zone? So let's say they had a 22-second shift and their Corsi is 50%. Well, for 11 seconds then, they're probably in the offensive zone, helping out offensively and helping his team score. That's important. That's very important. And so, as you can see here, let's go into the cleaned up version so you get a better look. Phil Kessel, on average, is much higher than the average NHL efficiency. And that's supposed to happen because he is a scoring winger, and he is an elite winger. If you look at, maybe a bit more average of a player, maybe, Connor Brown, maybe a younger player who's actually below average but still playing when not injured, maybe Zach Aston Reese. Well, you see their numbers will be below NHL average. And that makes sense because the NHL effectiveness is supposed to be for an average NHL player who's played maybe 2, 3, 4 seasons in the league, is a well-seasoned player that knows what they're doing. If you have a young rookie or first-year player that hasn't played much, well, their NHL effectiveness or their player effectiveness in total might just be a bit lower because they might get burned more often on defense. They might not know how to contribute as well on offense. And that's perfectly fine. But now, in this stat, Corsi is used a lot. So this graph right here kind of shows, it's very hard to see. So if you'd like to, after this, see a much more cleaned up version of this graph, there will be a version in the article I'll publish. But if you can just kind of get a close look at it, you see a lot of these larger circles. That the size of the circle is the player effectiveness. The how high or low it is the Corsi. But as you can see here, the larger the circle and the Corsi values don't seem to be very related. And that's actually good because when I created this graph, I did not want it to be an extension of Corsi. I wanted it to be its own separate statistic that kind of built off of Corsi and made it a bit more accurate. So, all in all, Phil Kessel is an extremely effective scorer and is extremely effective forward. His scoring shows it. His splits, per team, goals and assists per team, his points per division, and his plus minus show it. And then his player effectiveness shows it as well. So Phil Kessel is he's an elite forward. He's one of a kind with his wrist shot, but he's also one of the top passers, and he's able to find the open guy, even though he doesn't play down low. He doesn't play dirty. He doesn't play down low. He doesn't, get goals in the crease. He plays a more shooting game, but because of that, he's able to make more, long crease passes, more cross crease passes to help set up one-timers. And it really ends up being Phil Kessel, the passer, has been very effective this season, but Phil Kessel, the goal scorer, has remained the same at that elite level. So, thank you very much for watching this week's episode of Triple Play Analytics on Phil Kessel. If you'd like to see the bubble graph in much better detail in a much higher form, and also kind of get a bit more into the numbers and a bit more in depth. I'll be writing and publishing an article on this very shortly. It'll be on my website. I'll leave a link in the description below. But if you just want to hear it now, it'll be at sasankvishnubutla.net. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this. Please let me know if you want me to take a look at any other players. Otherwise, next week it'll be a bit of a surprise. It might be either NBA or NHL, or just because spring training has started in the MLB, might be taking a look at a young MLB player that might be struggling a bit, but still has hidden talent in them. So, thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great day.